Just when everything seemed calm in Kiranzi, and the air was finally filled with peace, a dark shadow began to rise again. The people had started to believe that the old days of blood and fear were gone forever. Zubari had rebuilt his life. He had turned his hands from weapons to healing. The streets that once trembled under his name now echoed with laughter and hope. But evil has a way of crawling back, especially when it feels forgotten. Whispers started moving through the alleys, quiet at first, then louder. The underworld was regrouping. Old enemies, bitter rivals, and those Zubari had once defeated or spared were coming together under a new, terrifying name, the Black Vulture Circle. This was not just any gang. This was a brutal force fueled by revenge and hatred. They weren't just after power, they wanted destruction, and leading them was a face no one saw coming, Naruto, a name that sent shivers through the hearts of the few who knew him. But the shocking part wasn't just his cruelty, it was his bloodline. Naruto was Zubari's half-brother, a secret child of their father's shameful past. Raised in pain and rejection, Naruto carried a heart full of fury. While Zubari was feared in his prime, Naruto was far worse, cold, ruthless, and heartless. He believed Zubari had gone soft, that he had betrayed the blood they shared by choosing peace over power. Naruto saw Zubari's transformation as weakness. He called him the tamed beast, and he swore to burn down everything Zubari had built, his name, his legacy, and even his family. "You gave them peace," he said in one of his secret meetings, "but I will give them fear, and they will remember which bloodline truly rules Kiranzi." And so, the circle began to spread. Former gang members Zubari had forgiven were now joining Naruto, angry that their old leader had turned into a man of peace. Drug lords, arms smugglers, street enforcers, all rallied under the Black Vulture symbol. The city didn't know it yet, but a storm was coming. A storm wrapped in silence and shadows, and at the center of it was a brother Zubari never knew existed, coming not to shake hands, but to burn everything to ashes. It started with a smell, burnt wood. Khalifa stepped outside the community shelter just before dawn, only to freeze in her tracks. Her heart pounded. Right there on the wall, scorched into the bricks like a scar, was a strange, terrifying symbol. A large vulture's wings spread across a circle, the mark of the Black Vultures. Her fingers trembled as she touched the charred wall. Whoever had done this didn't come for money. They came with a message, a silent threat, but the worst was yet to come. That night, as Khalifa walked into their small home to tuck in the twins, she noticed something unusual on the dining table. A letter, no envelope, just a single piece of rough, torn paper. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the words written in bold strokes. "With blood, you turned a monster into a man. Now we'll turn him back." Khalifa's hands shook. Her heart raced. She clutched the paper, eyes wide, trying to make sense of the message. But deep down, her spirit knew this wasn't a prank. This was war. She waited until Zubari returned from a late-night community meeting. She showed him the paper and took him to the burnt wall. But Zubari only stared at it for a while, then looked away with a heavy sigh. "It's just ghosts from my past trying to scare us," he said, brushing her fears aside. "They want attention, that's all." But Khalifa knew better. She had seen the coldness behind those words. This wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. A storm was coming, one darker than they had ever faced. And this time, it wasn't only Zubari's life at risk. It was their home, their children, their peace. She felt it in her bones. The calm was over, and the vultures were already circling. It was supposed to be a day of hope. Zubari had traveled to the neighboring city to speak at a peace summit, his heart full of pride and purpose. He stood before leaders and activists, speaking of change, redemption, and the power of transformation. But while he spoke of peace, a storm was brewing at home, one that would shatter the very soul of Kiranzi. Back at the shelter, Khalifa was preparing dinner, the twins Jabari and Kaloni playing just outside with a group of other children. Their laughter filled the air, innocent and free. But in a blink, that laughter vanished. The children were gone. Chaos erupted. The guards found nothing. No struggle, no scream, just two small sandals left behind in the dust. Khalifa's heart dropped. Panic seized her chest. She ran from room to room calling their names, praying they were hiding or playing a prank. But they were gone, completely gone. Then, just an hour later, a video surfaced. It spread across the city like wildfire. Phones buzzed, screens lit up, and silence fell everywhere as people watched the nightmare unfold. The video showed a dark room, flickering with a single overhead light, and there, chained and crying, were Zubari and Khalifa, their faces bruised, their clothes torn. Standing beside them was a man cloaked in black, his face partially revealed. It was Naruto, Zubari's unknown half-brother. His voice was cold, sharp, and filled with venom. "Zubari," he said, staring directly into the camera. "You left the underworld, but you took our empire with you. You betrayed blood. You betrayed power. You betrayed legacy. Now, I will give you a choice. Return to what you were, or bury your future." He pulled one of the twins forward, placing a blade dangerously close to the child's neck. Khalifa watched the screen and fell to her knees. Her scream pierced the walls, the streets, the skies. People from all corners of Kiranzi heard it, and for a moment, the entire city held its breath. Tears streamed down her face as the video continued. Naruto listed his demands. Zubari must dissolve the Khalifa Foundation, hand over all properties, and return to the leadership of a newly revived criminal empire. "You have 72 hours, Naruto said, "or you'll lose both your sons, and your peace will die with them." Fear swept across the nation. News channels picked it up. Social media exploded. "Save the Twins" began trending. Crowds gathered outside the shelter, praying, shouting, holding candles, and calling for justice. But behind the noise was a deeper question. Would Zubari return to the dark world he fought so hard to escape, just to save his children? Khalifa couldn't breathe. She held the video on repeat, whispering their names like a prayer. Her heart was torn between fear and fury. She knew this wasn't just a kidnapping, it was a war to break Zubari's soul and drag him back into the darkness. And the clock was ticking. Khalifa could have broken. She could have fallen into despair and drowned in her tears. But she didn't. The moment she saw her sons in chains, something inside her changed. The gentle, kind-hearted woman who once healed broken souls now stood as a warrior mother, a fire burning in her eyes, a storm rising in her heart. She disappeared from the public eye. While the media speculated and mourned, Khalifa quietly slipped into the shadows, her pain transforming into purpose. She knew waiting for Zubari alone to act wasn't enough. Time was running out, and her babies were in danger. She had to act, and fast. In the dark alleys of Kiranzi, she began assembling a secret force. People no one would expect. Not trained soldiers or powerful politicians, but ordinary people with extraordinary stories. There were reformed gangsters who had once fought beside Zubari, now working as carpenters and drivers. There were widows whose husbands had died in the streets, women who knew how to move in silence. And there were street kids, tough, quick, invisible to the world, now grown and ready to fight for the woman who once gave them food and dignity. Each one of them had a reason to fight. Each one had a debt to Khalifa and Zubari. They didn't carry fancy weapons, but they carried loyalty, pain, and rage, fuel enough to move mountains. Khalifa met them in abandoned warehouses, behind closed market stalls, and in old safe houses Zubari once used during his past life. She shared her plan, and they all nodded without hesitation. "We don't just rescue her children," one of them said. "We rescue hope." Khalifa became their leader, not with loud speeches or iron fists, but with the silent strength of a mother who refused to lose her family. She trained with them, learned their codes, mapped every possible location Naruto's men could be hiding. She disguised herself, moved through the streets unnoticed, and collected every rumor, every whisper, every clue. She knew the enemy was watching her, waiting for her to break, but she gave them nothing to see. Behind her soft voice now lay sharp strategy. Her once warm eyes now scanned every corner like a hawk. The woman who once bandaged wounds was now sharpening knives of justice. She sent messages to trusted allies outside Kiranzi, asking for support, maps, and intelligence. She even reached out to people from Zubari's darkest past, those who had vanished years ago but still owed him respect. Slowly, her network grew. Quietly, power shifted. Khalifa, the healer, had become a commander, and through it all, she never cried again. Not in public. Her tears were gone, replaced by fire. She whispered her sons' names before every strategy meeting. She carried their small toys in her pocket as a reminder. She didn't sleep much, but she didn't need to. Her heart was awake, and her mission was clear. This was no longer just about saving Zubari and Khalifa. It was about protecting everything they had built, everything Zubari had changed for. It was about proving that even in the face of evil, a mother's courage could rise like a storm. And this time, it wouldn't be Zubari who led the fight. It would be Kalifa, the warrior mother. Zubari sat in silence, staring into the flames of the small fire pit, his fists clenched, his eyes empty. The weight of pain in his chest was heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. He wanted peace. He had fought for peace. But now, everything was being torn apart in front of him. His children were in the hands of a monster, and the monster was his own blood, Naruto. At first, Zubari tried diplomacy. He sent word through trusted allies, offered to meet, to talk, to find a way without bloodshed. But Naruto wasn't looking for peace. He wanted power. He wanted to drag Zubari back into the shadows, into the life he had fought so hard to leave behind. And when Naruto killed one of the shelter's children, a boy who used to sit on Zubari's shoulders and call him Uncle Zubari, something inside him cracked. That boy's small body, wrapped in a torn cloth, was brought into the center of the shelter grounds. People wept. Khalifa held the boy's hand for the last time, but Zubari said nothing. His face was stone, his heart fire. He walked into his room and shut the door. For 3 days, he didn't speak to anyone. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He just sat in the dark, whispering names from his past, recalling old wounds, old instincts. Khalifa could feel it. She saw it in his eyes. The softness was fading. The light they had fought to keep alive was dimming. Zubari was slipping back into the ruthless man the world once feared. The way he moved, the way he stood, even the way he breathed. It was different, colder, sharper, silent, deadly, dangerous. He started training again, not for defense, but for destruction. He opened old trunks buried beneath the shelter, trunks filled with weapons, maps, disguises, codes. His hands remembered every gun, every knife, every trick of war. He called old contacts, people Khalifa had prayed they'd never see again. Men with no morals, no hearts, just loyalty to Zubari's old name. Khalifa begged him, pleaded with him. "We can still win without turning back," she whispered, her voice trembling. But Zubari didn't answer. His silence hurt more than words ever could. He was no longer Zubari the healer, the teacher, the father. He was becoming Zubari the beast, the very man she had once pulled out of hell. She watched him sharpen his blades under moonlight, watched him draw plans on walls, watched the fire in his eyes consume the peace in his soul. Her heart shattered with each passing moment. Was she losing him again? Was love not enough to hold him this time? But deep inside, Khalifa still believed in the man she once saved. She still believed that under that armor of rage was a heart still capable of compassion. But with each step he took toward revenge, that hope grew thinner. The world was watching. Kiranzi was holding its breath, and Khalifa was holding on to a fading dream. That Zubari wouldn't return to the darkness, that he wouldn't become the monster Naruto wanted him to be. But the question remained, when pushed beyond the limit, can a man truly stay changed? Or does the past always come back to claim its own? The sun had barely risen when Khalifa made the most daring decision of her life. With nothing but courage in her heart, she walked out of the safe house, ignoring the pleas of her allies. She wore no armor, carried no weapon, just the quiet strength of a mother and a woman who refused to watch her family crumble. Alone, she crossed into the dangerous lands ruled by the black vultures. Word spread fast. Khalifa had entered enemy territory. Soldiers stood confused as she walked past them with calm eyes and a steady pace. Not a single tremble in her step. Her bravery was unsettling. She walked into the lion's den without fear, and the air seemed to shift around her presence. When Naruto saw her, he was speechless. The infamous warlord, the ruthless half-brother of Zubari, had expected spies or assassins, not the soft-spoken woman whose kindness had tamed a beast. He stared at her, surprised, almost intrigued. Khalifa stood tall and said in a clear voice, "I have come to make a trade. Take me and let the children go." The room fell silent. Naruto laughed at first, mocking her courage. But beneath his laughter, there was something else, curiosity. This was the woman who had changed Zubari, the one who had turned a monster into a man. Now she stood before him, unafraid, offering herself without a second thought. He leaned forward, studying her face. "You think this is love?" he sneered. "You think your sacrifice will break me?" But Naruto didn't want her just for ransom. He wanted to humiliate Zubari, to crush his soul. So he made a chilling offer. He would spare the children, but only if Khalifa agreed to become his queen, not out of love, but as a symbol of betrayal. a weapon to stab Zubari's heart, to take the very woman who had redeemed his brother and make her the crown of his evil empire. Khalifa froze. She hadn't expected this. She had come prepared to suffer, to be imprisoned or even killed, but not to be turned into a tool for revenge. Naruto's eyes gleamed with cruelty. "Imagine it," he whispered. "The woman who raised a king now serving the enemy. That is the true victory." Her heart raced, but she didn't show it. She stood tall, even as his guards surrounded her. "You can lock my body," she said softly, "but you will never own my spirit." Her words struck something deep in Naruto, a flicker of hesitation, quickly buried under his thirst for vengeance. He ordered the twins to remain captive. Khalifa was taken inside his camp, not as a prisoner, but as a twisted guest of honor. He wanted to parade her, break her will slowly, and show the world that even purity can be bought. But Khalifa's calm presence unsettled everyone. Her quiet strength was louder than any scream. She spoke to the soldiers with kindness. She helped wounded guards. Even in captivity, she brought light to a place full of darkness. Naruto couldn't understand it. He had power, weapons, armies, but he couldn't break this woman's soul. And in that moment, something inside him began to crack. Kalifa, the woman who stood between two kings, wasn't just fighting for her children anymore. She was fighting for the soul of a broken world. And even in chains, her spirit refused to bow. Even inside the enemy's camp, Khalifa's spirit remained unshaken. She wasn't just a mother anymore. She had become a force of wisdom, calm, and unexplainable strength. Every day, though surrounded by ruthless warriors, she did something unexpected. She talked to them, not with fear, not with hate, but with softness, like a mother speaking to lost children. She didn't shout or argue. She simply spoke in a way that reached deep into their hearts. When guards brought her food, she would ask gently, "Do you ever miss peace?" When a wounded soldier passed by, she would tend his injury with her hands and say, "Your heart was not born for bloodshed." Her words weren't loud, but they echoed in the silence of their minds. Some of these men were once orphans. Some had lost families in wars. Some had never known kindness, until Khalifa. Slowly, her words became whispers in the wind, whispers that turned into thoughts, thoughts that turned into doubt. Is Naruto really our savior, or are we just weapons for his revenge? They began to ask themselves. Khalifa knew she couldn't fight them with fists or guns, but she could fight with truth, and truth has a way of digging deep into places even swords cannot reach. She shared small stories, how Zubari once saved abandoned children, how kindness rebuilt broken lives, how power without purpose leads only to emptiness. She didn't preach, she didn't beg, she simply told the truth, with the warmth of a mother's heart, and that was her secret weapon. One night, a young soldier named Damo, barely 20 with pain in his eyes, came to her quietly. "Why do you speak to us with such gentleness?" he asked. Khalifa looked at him and replied, "Because underneath all this armor and anger, I see a child who just wants to feel safe again." Those words shook him. He had not cried in years, but that night, tears rolled down his cheeks. Others noticed. Some began to walk away from cruelty. Some started questioning orders. And Naruto could feel the change in the air. His warriors, once blind with loyalty, now carried uncertainty in their hearts. Khalifa was planting seeds of doubt, silent but powerful seeds. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She healed. She reminded them who they were before war turned them into monsters. Naruto grew restless. He knew something was happening, but he didn't understand how one woman, unarmed, imprisoned, could weaken his army from within. He tightened security. He gave cruel punishments. But the more he used fear, the stronger Khalifa's quiet wisdom became. Because fear fades, but a mother's voice echoes forever. Khalifa's wisdom became a light in the shadows of Naruto's camp. And even though she was still held captive, she was winning battles no one could see. She wasn't just fighting for her children anymore. She was waking up broken hearts and giving lost souls a reason to hope again. And slowly, the black vultures were no longer flying as one. Their wings were cracking, all because of the unshakable wisdom of a mother. The night was thick with tension as Zubari finally reached the black vulture's stronghold. His face was hard, his heart burning, but this time he carried no weapon, no guns, no blades, just the weight of his past and the hope of redemption. His steps were slow but sure, and the moment he stepped into the camp, soldiers froze. They expected war, violence, bloodshed, but Zubari came with something far more powerful, his truth. Standing in the heart of enemy territory, Zubari didn't raise his fists. He raised his voice, and for the first time, the ruthless warlord everyone feared became a broken man speaking from his soul. "I was once like you," he began, voice raw and shaking. "I wore anger like armor. I hurt people before they could hurt me. I thought power was everything. But then, I met Khalifa." Every eye turned to him. Even the toughest men felt something shift. "She didn't just love me. She taught me to love myself. She didn't fix me with bullets. She fixed me with belief. She didn't heal me with medicine. She healed me with mercy." Zubari's words hit like thunder. His voice trembled, but his truth was louder than any gunshot. "I know many of you were raised in pain. I know some of you only know violence. But I came here today to show you there's another way. I was a monster, but love made me human again." Even Khalifa, watching from the shadows, felt her heart break and swell at the same time. Zubari dropped to his knees. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to beg, not for my life, but for yours. Walk away from this bloodshed. Don't let Naruto destroy what's left of your souls. Don't let your pain become your legacy." Silence. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then something unbelievable happened. A soldier lowered his gun, then another, then another. Slowly, men who once killed without mercy began backing away. Their eyes weren't filled with rage anymore. They were filled with reflection. But Naruto was watching, and his face twisted with fury. He stormed out, shouting, "This is weakness! He's poisoning your minds!" Zubari stood again. "No, Naruto, you poisoned them with hate. I'm giving them a cure." Naruto lunged forward, fists clenched. He wanted blood, but Zubari didn't raise his hands. He only looked at him with deep sadness. "You are my brother by blood," Zubari said quietly, "but not by heart. You've chosen darkness, and I have chosen light." Naruto attacked, but this time his men didn't follow. No one helped him. No one cheered. He fought alone, screaming in rage, but the war was already over. Not by guns, not by blades, but by one man's honest confession and the quiet echo of a mother's love. That day, Zubari won not with power, but with heart, and the world would never forget the warlord who put down his weapons to speak truth and turned an army with nothing but love. Amidst the chaos, as the dust of Zubari's words still lingered in the air, a quiet yet powerful storm was rising. Khalifa. Her strength wasn't in loud declarations or brutal force, but in calm, fearless action. As Zubari held the attention of the camp with his emotional confession, Khalifa moved quietly toward the place where her children were being held. Her heart pounded, but her mind was clear. She had come too far to let fear win now. With the help of a few vultures who had already been touched by her wisdom and Zubari's truth, Khalifa located Jabari and Kaloni, tied and frightened but alive. The moment she saw them, tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't break down. She stayed strong for them. She untied their little hands, held them close, and whispered, "Mama's here. You're safe now." But safety was still miles away. The camp was still under Naruto's grip, and he was growing more dangerous by the second. When he realized Khalifa had rescued the twins, his fury exploded like a volcano. He grabbed his weapon, storming toward her with murderous rage. His eyes were dark, filled with nothing but vengeance. He wanted to end it, end her, right there. But Khalifa didn't run. She didn't scream. She stood tall, children behind her, eyes locked with Naruto's like fire meeting ice. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice calm and firm, "because I know something you'll never understand. Love is stronger than fear." Naruto raised his gun, ready to shoot. The camp held its breath. But then, something incredible happened. One of Naruto's most loyal men stepped forward, then another, then another. Their eyes were no longer clouded by blind loyalty. They had seen Khalifa's courage. They had felt the change, and they couldn't let this evil continue. "No more," one of them said, stepping between Khalifa and Naruto. Another shouted, "She's right. We were fighting for nothing. She gave us purpose." Naruto tried to push through, but his own men now held him back. Their loyalty had shifted, not to power, but to peace. Not to terror, but to hope. The moment was powerful. It was not just the fall of a warlord, it was the rise of a queen. Not a queen in a palace, wearing gold and jewels, but a queen born from pain, strength, and love. Khalifa didn't need a crown. Her heart was her crown. Her courage was her throne. The soldiers laid down their arms, one by one, like broken pieces of a violent past, finally letting go. Khalifa stood in the center of it all, holding her children, surrounded by those who once stood for chaos, now kneeling before peace. That moment marked a new chapter. Khalifa was no longer just Zubari's wife. She was the heartbeat of a new movement, a symbol of healing, a woman who faced death but chose life, a mother who turned pain into power, a queen, not by title, but by spirit. And the world would never forget the woman who silenced guns with grace, who turned enemies into believers, and who taught everyone that true power lies not in war, but in love. The sun finally rose over Kiranzi, not just in the sky, but in the hearts of its people. The darkness that once gripped the village was gone. The cries of war had faded, replaced by the laughter of children, the songs of hope, and the footsteps of change. Khalifa stood at the heart of this new beginning, no longer just a survivor of pain, but the mother of a movement. The woman who once walked in shadows was now guiding others toward the light. She didn't rest in comfort or luxury. Instead, she used her pain to build something powerful, a leadership school for young girls, a place where they were not just taught how to read or write, but how to lead with wisdom, speak with courage, and love with strength. Khalifa taught them that tears weren't weakness, and kindness wasn't soft. She taught them that the strongest warriors wear invisible armor, made of empathy, purpose, and self-belief. Girls who were once told they were worthless now walked tall, heads high, dreams big. Every lesson Khalifa shared came from her scars. She didn't hide her past. She used it as a mirror to show others what they could overcome. Her voice echoed through classrooms, telling stories of how she once knelt in fear, how she once faced death with trembling hands, and how she rose, not by fighting like a man, but by standing like a queen. Meanwhile, the twins Zubari and Kaloni grew with that same fire in their hearts. They had seen pain, but they also saw their mother's strength. They carried her legacy in their eyes. As they grew older, they traveled across the lands as ambassadors of peace, visiting villages, speaking to the youth, reminding people that forgiveness is not weakness and healing is the highest power. They stood on global stages, sharing their story, not as victims, but as messengers of change. Zubari, too, walked a different path now. The man who once ruled with fear was now building bridges with compassion. He founded a global peace initiative, bringing former gang leaders, war survivors, and young dreamers together. He used his experience, his regrets, and his rebirth to guide others away from destruction and toward hope. He no longer sought revenge. He sought redemption in every step, every word, every life he touched. Together, this family became a symbol across nations, not of perfection, but of powerful transformation. The name Khalifa spread beyond Kiranzi, from tiny classrooms in dusty villages to conferences in towering cities. People spoke her name with respect and awe. She wasn't born a leader, but she became one through fire and grace. Her image, once a silent girl in pain, now stood on walls, in books, and in hearts, a beacon of what a single woman's strength can do. And so, Kiranzi bloomed. The village that once lived in fear now thrived in harmony. Mothers walked freely, children sang louder, girls dreamed bigger. The legacy of Khalifa was not just in what she did, but in what she awakened in others. A new dawn had begun, one led by love, one built by courage, one shaped by a woman who refused to let her pain be the end of her story. Instead, she made it the beginning of a global legacy. If this story touched your heart, if Khalifa's strength made you pause, if her journey from pain to power stirred something deep inside you, then don't let it end here. Share this message. Let her voice echo beyond this screen. Let the world see that even in the darkest corners, light can rise. Not with swords, but with love. Not with revenge, but with wisdom. Let this story remind someone out there that they are not broken. They are becoming. Think of that one person who needs this story right now. A mother fighting in silence. A girl doubting her worth. A man battling his past. Be the bridge that brings them hope. Send this story to them. Let Khalifa's courage be their spark. And if you believe that stories like this deserve to reach more hearts, then help us grow this family of healing and strength. Click that like button, not just for us, but for every warrior like Khalifa. Share this video with someone you love. Subscribe to our channel, because here, every story carries a heartbeat, every tale carries a purpose, and every word can change a life. We are more than just storytellers. We are a movement of hearts, hope, and healing. And you, dear viewer, are now a part of that journey. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for standing with us. Until our next story, stay kind, stay brave, and never forget, your story too can inspire the world.